The morning sun hit the edge of the magnifying glass, casting a sharp, concentrated beam of light onto the curled, sickly green leaf. Alex didn't move. He stood completely still at the edge of the pomelo orchard, the muscles in his jaw tight. Through the thick glass, a silent, microscopic army was feeding. Thousands of tiny, pale white aphids writhed in a dense, suffocating blanket over the new growth. They were sucking the life out of the trees, and worse, they were multiplying with terrifying speed. If this were a conventional farm, the solution would be sitting in the dark corner of the storage shed. A simple, cheap chemical spray that would end the infestation before noon. But this wasn't a conventional farm, and taking that easy way out would instantly destroy everything they had sacrificed to build. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are facing the hidden, terrifying cost of trying to grow food the right way. And right now, doing the right thing means we might lose the entire orchard. Back at the house, the morning routine was still peaceful, completely unaware of the crisis brewing just past the bamboo gate. Little Henry sat on the wooden porch steps, his small dusty sandals kicking gently against the wood as he pushed a toy wooden truck through a mound of loose soil. He was humming a quiet, tuneless song to himself, completely oblivious to the financial threat hovering over his family's future. Tu Na stepped out of the warm kitchen, wiping her damp hands on her cotton apron. She carried 2 small ceramic cups of steaming green tea, the familiar earthy scent mixing with the damp, heavy morning air. She walked toward the edge of the yard, expecting to find Alex quietly pruning the lower branches as he always did. Instead, she stopped. She didn't need to see the aphids to know something was terribly wrong. She could read the unnatural tension in Alex's shoulders, the rigid, unmoving way he held the magnifying glass. The fragile, quiet peace of their morning shattered in an instant. Tu Na set the teacups down on the rough wooden table by the porch. The ceramic clinked against the wood, a sharp, hollow sound that seemed too loud for the quiet farm. She walked slowly over the damp grass to stand beside her husband, her eyes following his gaze down to the dying leaves. The new pomelo shoots, which just yesterday looked vibrant and full of promise, were now blackened at the edges, drooping under the weight of the infestation. They stood together in silence. In the world of organic farming, a pest outbreak doesn't just mean a temporary, annoying setback. It means a complete, devastating disruption. There is no quick rescue. You are entirely exposed to the brutal, unforgiving mechanics of nature. And right now, nature was eating their livelihood. An hour later, the reality of their situation began to crush the oxygen out of the room. They sat opposite each other at the worn wooden table on the porch. Between them lay a thick stack of paper, their organic certification contract. It was crisp and white, the stark black ink contrasting heavily with the weathered rustic grain of the table beneath it. Alex pressed his rough, calloused index finger against a specific line on the page, tracing the heavy, bolded words. Zero tolerance. Tu Na leaned forward, her dark eyes tired but fiercely determined. They both knew exactly what that clause meant. The organic buyer had a scheduled, mandatory inspection looming at the end of the month. If the inspector detected a single drop of synthetic pesticide in the soil or on the leaves, the contract would be immediately cancelled. Not just for this season, but forever. The premium price that kept their family afloat, the clean soil they had spent 3 exhausting years rehabilitating, all of it would be gone in a single afternoon. Tu Na looked past the porch at the sprawling rows of young pomelo trees. The morning wind rustled gently through the branches. Normally, the sound of the wind in the leaves brought them a deep, grounding peace. Today, it sounded exactly like a ticking clock. The aphids wouldn't wait for them to make a decision. By tomorrow, they would spread to the next row. By the end of the week, the second acre would be deeply infected. Alex closed the contract, the heavy paper making a dull, defeated thud against the wood. He looked at Tu Na, sharing the silent, heavy burden of a difficult path. They had promised to build a clean life for Henry, a farm free from poisons, a place where their son could eat fruit straight from the branch without fear. They were protecting him from the harshness of the world, absorbing the immense financial and emotional stress entirely on their own shoulders. But looking out at the dying trees, they both realized the terrifying truth of clean agriculture. Good intentions don't pay the bills, and right now they had no idea how to save the farm. Later that afternoon, the heavy metallic clank of an old brass pump sprayer echoed across the yard. Uncle Bar walked up the dirt path, his weathered face set in a deep, worried frown. He had seen the sickly, drooping branches from the main road. In his strong, calloused hands, he carried an old stone mortar and a woven basket filled with intense red chilies, sharp wild garlic, and a thick glass bottle of dark, unrefined neem oil. "We burn them out," Bartang said quietly, setting the heavy tools down on the wooden porch. For the next hour, the only sound was the rhythmic, punishing grind of stone against stone. Alex and Uncle Bar worked in total silence, crushing the chilies and garlic into a potent, stinging paste. The sharp oils hung heavy in the humid afternoon air, making their eyes water and their lungs burn with every breath. They carefully mixed the potent paste with the thick neem oil and fresh well water, pouring the stinging liquid into the metal tank. They didn't spray the whole orchard. You never risk your entire livelihood on an untested cure. Alex pumped the handle, carefully coating a single heavily infested branch on the far edge of the first acre. It was a brutal, traditional remedy that had protected small backyard gardens in the village for generations. But as the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, the hidden cost of scaling up old methods became painfully clear. 4 hours later, Alex walked back to the test tree. He didn't need the magnifying glass this time. The aphids were completely dead. But so was the branch. The harsh, acidic oils had suffocated the pests, but the intense afternoon heat combined with the chili mixture had aggressively scorched the fragile young pomelo leaves. Alex reached out. The once supple green leaf crumbled instantly into dry, blackened ash between his fingers. He dropped the ash into the dirt. The traditional spray was far too harsh for the delicate new growth. If they used it on the rest of the trees, they would kill the pests, but they would burn their own orchard to the ground in the process. Time was officially up, the wind was picking up, and the white swarm was already visibly drifting toward the second acre. They were completely out of options. That night, the wooden house was heavy with an exhausted, defeated silence. In the bedroom, little Henry was fast asleep, his small chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm, completely insulated from his parents' fear. But out in the main room, the darkness was broken by the cold blue glow of a smartphone screen. Tu Na hadn't slept. She sat wrapped in a thin cotton blanket at the dining table, her eyes red and aching. For hours, she scrolled through endless agricultural forums and complicated university research papers. She was desperately searching for a miracle that wouldn't violate their strict organic contract. Sometime past 2 in the morning, her thumb finally stopped. She had found a biological solution, true ecological pest control, but it wasn't a natural spray, and it wasn't a mineral powder. It was an army. To save an orchard this size, they needed tens of thousands of live predatory ladybugs. And they needed them before the sun set tomorrow. Committing to a truly clean life means giving up the illusion of easy fixes. It forces you into terrifying, uncharted territory where the only way forward is a massive, uncomfortable leap of faith. By dawn, the cold morning mist was still clinging to the tall grass as Alex started the truck engine. He wasn't driving to the local farm supply store. The nearest specialized biological breeding center was 3 hours away, hidden deep in the neighboring province. He drove in tense silence, the empty rural roads a gray blur outside the window. When he finally arrived, the transaction felt entirely surreal. There were no heavy bags of fertilizer, no familiar chemical drums. Alex reached into his worn jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. It was a painful, heavy sum, a massive chunk of their emergency cash reserves, money carefully saved from months of selling premium fruit. He swallowed hard and handed the thick stack of worn bills across the counter. In return, the technician handed him a few unassuming white mesh bags. Alex walked back out to the truck as the morning sun broke through the clouds. He held the bags carefully. Inside, there was a strange, delicate rustling sound, a frantic, vibrating energy. He stared down at the tens of thousands of tiny, crawling red dots pressing against the white mesh. He had just gambled the entire financial safety of his family on a bag of insects. He placed them in the passenger seat, turned the key, and began the long, anxious drive home. The late afternoon sun was casting long, desperate shadows over the sickly orchard when Alex finally pulled the truck up to the bamboo gate. He cut the engine, the sudden silence hanging heavy in the warm, humid air. He stepped out, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, wiping a layer of cold sweat and road dust from his neck. Tu Na and Uncle Bar were already waiting on the porch, standing close together, holding little Henry's hands. They walked slowly toward the truck bed. Alex reached into the cab and gently pulled out the white mesh bags. This was the hidden, terrifying cost of their dream. Organic farming isn't just a romantic label printed on a piece of paper. It is an active, terrifying battleground that tests a family's nerve and drains their bank account. As they stood together in the fading light, listening to the delicate, rustling movement of tens of thousands of tiny insects vibrating inside the bags, they felt completely exposed. They had emptied their savings and abandoned the safety of traditional familiar cures. They were betting their entire future on a fragile ecosystem they couldn't entirely control. They walked together to the top of the hill, the golden hour light washing warmly over the damaged pomelo trees. Alex knelt in the dry dirt, placing the first bag gently on the soil. He looked up at Tu Na. She offered a small, hopeful nod, the deep worry in her eyes softening just a little. Alex gently guided Henry's small hands to the string, letting his son pull the knot loose. Thousands of tiny red ladybugs instantly spilled out into the warm evening air. It was a beautiful, almost magical sight. The small red beetles crawled up the rough bark and flew toward the curled, dying leaves, immediately going to work. One stray ladybug landed softly on Henry's nose, making the little boy erupt into bright, echoing giggles that seemed to chase the heavy fear right out of the orchard. A week later, the quiet peace had fully returned to the wooden house. Alex stood at the edge of the yard, looking closely through his magnifying glass. The suffocating white swarm was entirely gone. In its place, the bright, clean green of healthy new growth reached up toward the morning sun. Nature had healed itself. Tu Na walked out onto the porch, carrying a fresh cup of tea. She smiled warmly, holding up her hand. A single red ladybug rested quietly on her finger. Doing things the hard way often leaves us feeling completely vulnerable, risking everything we have built. But when we refuse to compromise, we step back and give the land a chance to breathe. The farm isn't just surviving anymore. It's finally awake, and as long as they hold the line together, their roots will only grow deeper into the clean soil. If you've ever had to take a difficult leap of faith to protect your family's future, share your story with us in the comments below. Let us know what you thought of today's journey and how you handle the hidden costs of doing things the right way.